Welcome back to the Deep Dive Podcast. I'm Eric, and as always, I'm joined by Anna. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Eric. Happy to be back. I'm looking forward to today's discussion because we're covering a topic that tends to get everyone's attention in the life sciences industry: FDA warning letters.
Definitely not the kind of mail anyone wants showing up,
No, not at all. But what's interesting is that a lot of companies think warning letters happen because of one bad inspection or one major mistake.
right? And that's usually not what happens.
Exactly. Most warning letters are the result of patterns. FDA sees recurring issues, recurring observations, and over time they start questioning whether the company is really in control of its quality systems.
And those patterns can show up in a lot of different ways. CAPAs that aren't effective, repeat deviations, documentation issues, training gaps, weak oversight.
Or situations where the company keeps fixing the symptom but never addresses the underlying cause.
That's really the focus of today's conversation. How companies prepare for potential warning letters before they happen, and why inspection readiness has become such a critical part of long-term compliance strategy.
Because by the time you're talking about a warning letter, regulators are usually looking at much more than a single observation.
Exactly. At this point, they're evaluating the system. One thing we've seen over the last several years is FDA expectations continuing to evolve.
Absolutely. Inspectors aren't just looking to see whether procedures exist anymore. They're asking whether those procedures actually work.
You can have binders full of SOPs and beautifully written procedures. But if execution is inconsistent, inspectors are going to find that pretty quickly.
That's a great point. We see organizations that have governance structures, quality metrics, validated systems, all the things you'd expect. But when you start looking at day to day execution, gaps begin to appear.
And that's where operational maturity becomes really important.
Exactly.
Recently, Emma International worked with a life sciences manufacturer that was facing increased regulatory scrutiny after receiving recurring observations across several operational areas.
Leadership recognized that they had quality procedures in place, but they didn't necessarily have a structured strategy for managing increasing compliance risk.
And that's an important distinction.
It really is. Like having a quality system and having a quality system that can withstand regulatory scrutiny are two very different things.
In this case, the company was dealing with challenges around CAPA effectiveness, deviation management, documentation practices, and broader quality oversight.
What's interesting is that none of those issues looked catastrophic on their own,
Right. If you isolated any one finding, it probably wouldn't have seemed like a major problem.
but collectively they started creating a trend, and
And regulators pay very close attention to trends,
especially repeat observations. If inspectors keep seeing the same types of issues, they start asking whether the organization truly understands what's driving them.
which leads into one of the biggest misconceptions we see around inspection readiness. The idea that you can prepare for an inspection a few weeks before it happens.
Precisely. True inspection readiness isn't something you switch on temporarily. It has to be part of how the organization operates every day.
Year-round, not just when FDA is expected.
I couldn't agree more.
Another misconception is that warning letters are mostly tied to manufacturing issues.
That's definitely not the case.
Not even close.
FDA enforcement can involve data integrity, investigations, supplier oversight, validation activities, complaint handling, training programs, and management accountability.
And when regulators start seeing weaknesses across multiple systems, the discussion becomes much bigger than individual findings.
It becomes a question of quality culture.
Exactly.
One of the first things Emma International did for this client was conduct a comprehensive assessment of GMP operations and quality systems.
The goal wasn't just finding obvious gaps.
It was understanding where systemic weaknesses existed and where future enforcement risk could develop.
The team evaluated deviations, CAPAs, documentation controls, training programs, governance structures, oversight processes, and escalation pathways.
Because operational drift happens more often than people realize.
That's very true.
Teams get busy, production demands increase, deadlines pile up. Over time, small weaknesses become normalized.
Then what do you know? An inspector comes in with a fresh set of eyes,
And suddenly, those weaknesses become much more visible.
Things like incomplete investigations, weak root cause analyses, delayed CAPAs, inconsistent documentation, and recurring deviations.
Those are exactly the kinds of patterns regulators focus on.
Mock inspections also played a major role in this engagement.
And I bet all for good reason.
You'd win that bet. Mock inspections are one of the best ways to evaluate how prepared an organization really is.
Because they test much more than documentation.
Yes, exactly. They test people.
How people in teams answer questions, how quickly records can be retrieved, whether departments provide consistent information, whether escalation pathways actually work.
FDA inspectors are evaluating confidence and consistency.
They're also evaluating transparency.
If different departments tell different stories, that's a problem.
And if employees seem uncertain about procedures, that's something inspectors notice immediately.
Which is why inspection readiness is really an organizational capability, not just a documentation exercise.
That's a great way to put it, Eric.
Thanks, Anna. Let's talk about remediation planning, because that's another area where organizations sometimes struggle.
One of the biggest mistakes companies make is focusing only on short term corrective actions.
So basically, fixing today's problem without preventing tomorrow's?
Exactly. For this client, remediation focused on immediate compliance concerns, but also governance improvements, stronger oversight, clearer escalation processes, and long term quality system strengthening.
Because sustainable remediation requires addressing root causes, not just symptoms.
Right?
Governance was another major focus area.
And honestly, it's one of the most important topics in enforcement prevention.
Yet it's often overlooked.
FDA increasingly expects executive leadership to be actively engaged in compliance oversight.
Leadership can't be surprised by quality issues after regulators identify them.
Exactly, they need visibility before that happens.
Communication was another key part of the engagement, which is often underestimated. A lot of organizations don't think about inspection communication until they're already in the middle of an inspection.
But by then, it's much harder.
Much harder.
That's why communication protocols, response structures, escalation procedures, and ownership models were established in advance,
Because even small communication breakdowns can create larger concerns.
especially when responses aren't consistent.
Another topic that's worth discussing is quality culture.
Absolutely.
FDA doesn't directly inspect culture, but they observe it everywhere they go.
They watch how people respond, how transparent they are, whether they take ownership of issues, whether quality appears to be a priority.
A strong quality culture is difficult to fake.
And a weak one is difficult to hide.
That's very true.
Organizations that demonstrate accountability and transparency generally establish stronger credibility with regulators, even when observations occur.
Because observations themselves aren't necessarily unusual.
Exactly. What matters is how the organization responds.
FDA wants to see timely action, meaningful remediation, leadership involvement, and sustainable improvement.
Ultimately, that's what this engagement helped achieve.
The organization strengthened inspection readiness, improved quality system effectiveness, enhanced response coordination, and reduced regulatory risk exposure.
But perhaps most importantly, leadership gained confidence in the organization's ability to handle future regulatory scrutiny. Because in highly regulated industries, resilience matters.
No organization can eliminate every compliance risk. That's just reality.
But organizations can build systems that identify, escalate, manage, and correct risks before they become major enforcement actions.
And that's really the takeaway from today's discussion. Preparing for FDA warning letters isn't about expecting failure.
It's about building maturity, stronger governance, better oversight, more effective CAPAs, and sustainable quality systems.
And those improvements don't just help during inspections.
They improve overall business performance as well.
Well said, Anna.
As regulatory expectations continue to evolve, organizations that invest in inspection readiness today will be much better positioned for tomorrow.
Because the best time to find a compliance issue is before the FDA does.
Exactly. The organizations that stay ahead of compliance challenges are usually the ones that spend the least time reacting to them later.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive Podcast.
And remember, inspection readiness isn't a project, it's a mindset. We'll see you next time.